So Scott, what we're going to do now is talk a little bit about what would be our preferred brewing method.
Right.
Oftentimes people ask us what's the best way to make coffee, and although brewed coffee that's done drip method is certainly going to be delicious, we always recommend that people make their coffee in a French press, and there's a number of reasons why we do that. First off, if you think about this simple way of brewing coffee, it's simply going to be similar to what we did with cupping. It's going to be coffee and water in a chamber, and they're going to work together to make us this delicious beverage. Now, a lot of times people see this and they wonder, well, it looks confusing, I don't really know how to work it. So what I wanted to show you was simply how simple a machine this really is. What I'm holding is the top, obviously, and the top has a center piece, a pole, and at the bottom of the pole, there's a screw that simply screws in to these three parts.
Right.
The top plate, the screen, and the bottom plate. Essentially, this is like a window screen, and this is going to be the key to the whole thing working because it's going to allow the liquid to go through, but not the grounds. So when I build this, I'm simply going to put the screen in between the two pieces, and then I'm going to put that screw right into that hole at the bottom, easily, just like that. And then I can simply turn that until it gets tight. And now we have this plate, which is nice and tight. Now you can see right here, what I've done is I've put exactly the right amount of coffee. Now again, we talked earlier about the idea of proportion, because you asked a great question in cupping. With the French press, the proportion is going to be 2 tablespoons of coffee to every 6 ounces of water. It's a 12-cup press. Essentially, what we have is 48 ounces of liquid. So you do the math. What we're looking for is 8 2-tablespoon scoops, or 16 tablespoons.
About a cup.
And yeah, exactly. And we didn't invent that proportion, but actually in the 1940s, there was an organization called the Coffee Brewing Center, which tested coffee and a number of different proportions, and they determined that the best taste for coffee when you're brewing it would be 2 tablespoons to 6 ounces of water. So we've kept that proportion.
And is that just for French press or for drip also?
You know, that works perfectly for drip as well.
Okay.
Recognizing, of course, that people's tastes are different.
Right.
So if the coffee's too taste or too big tasting or not tasting enough, people make adjustments.
Right.
Although we would always recommend that they make those adjustments by finishing the coffee perfectly and then perhaps adding some water rather than fiddle with the proportions.
Right.
Edit?
Is the grind on this different than a drip?
It is, exactly. That's a great question, because when we talked earlier, we talked about proportion, grind.
Right.
So grind is going to be different, and the reason that it has to be different is you need to have granules of coffee that are just the right size to not come through the screen.
Right.
If you were doing this coffee for drip method, the coffee would be ground a little bit finer, because think about drip. There you're going to use a paper filter in most cases, so
Right.
you're going to hold back more. Now this coffee is probably just about ready to plunge, and what I wanted to show you was what we have now is coffee, which is in the water chamber. All of it is below the screen. So here's your screen, just like this. And what I'm going to do now is I'm essentially going to just push the screen to the bottom. So that's going to go to the bottom. And in doing that, it's going to take all the coffee right to the bottom of the press.
So how long did we wait between the boiling water?
Great question. So we put the coffee and the water together, and we timed exactly 4 minutes.
That's what I thought.
And 4 minutes is the recommended brewing time for this brewer. And again, we didn't invent that. That's what the people who invented the brewer in France, in fact, decided. So now we have a perfectly separated chamber filled with coffee at the bottom and coffee liquid to drink at the top. And this is the Sumatra that we had a chance to taste during our cupping. Be careful, because it's still very hot. But essentially, you can see that that coffee has nice beautiful aroma. Liquidity, got a great aroma, which is the first step that we're going to go through when we taste it. And I poured just enough so that if you were to just swirl it around a little bit, almost the way you would in a wine tasting, it's going to cool very quickly in the cup. And then you can taste it.
Very nice.
And again, remember with this coffee, what we found was that earthy, herbal quality. Got a great mouthfeel and a really lovely aroma. This coffee has a pretty big aroma.